So I was digging through an old hard drive the other day, like a digital attic full of forgotten stuff, half-finished things from maybe 10 years ago.
Always an adventure.
Totally. And I stumbled upon this essay I wrote back in 2014. Reading it was weird, like meeting a ghost of my younger, much angrier self.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah, that guy. Saw everything in black and white, corporations greedy, politicians corrupt, the whole system rigged against the little guy. Standard stuff, I guess.
A familiar tune.
Right. And he was writing furiously about, the rise of misinformation, the decay of public trust, and honestly, part of me wanted to high-five him.
Because he was onto something, even back then.
He really was, calling out problems that are, defining crises for us now. He saw it coming. But then I got to the end of his whole argument, and there was nothing. Seriously. No solutions, no next steps. His only tool against this really complex world was just this, sledgehammer of pure cynicism.
Just tear it all down.
Exactly. Distrust everyone, question everything, assume the absolute worst. And he talked about needing competence to solve global problems, but he seemed to, hate the actual experts.
People who might actually know something?
Yeah. Sociologists, scientists, public health folks, the people who might actually have a clue how to fix things. And that's when it hit me.
What?
The essay wasn't a call to action at all. It was basically a roadmap to paralysis, just sitting there being angry.
A perfect example of cynicism becoming useless.
Utterly useless.
Yeah.
It just adds to the noise it pretends to hate. So on this deep dive, that's our mission, really, to unpack why that kind of unchecked cynicism just fails.
And find something better.
Yes. We want to search for the actionable stuff, the, multifaceted approaches that move us beyond just pointing fingers. How do we actually find solutions?
Right.
We're going to dive into how a really interdisciplinary approach, mixing sociology, psychology, public health, all that stuff, might help us tackle these huge challenges of misinformation and cynicism.
Looking beyond just the usual suspects like economics and politics.
Exactly. And we'll also look at that critical need to, balance healthy skepticism, which is good, with a kind of discerning trust in actual verified expertise.
That's a tricky balance.
It really is. And finally, we'll explore the practical side, things like media literacy education, adaptive regulations, the stuff that actually empowers people and institutions to fight back against misinformation and maybe, just maybe, rebuild some trust. Okay, so let's start with the landscape. When we talk about information today, you just can't ignore disinformation and propaganda. They're everywhere.
It feels overwhelming sometimes.
It really does. And just to be clear, when we say disinformation, we mean stuff that's deliberately false, right? Spread strategically to mislead people.
Intentional deception.
Exactly. Whereas propaganda, that's more about spreading half-truths or maybe misleading info, all to persuade you towards a certain viewpoint or political agenda.
Manipulation for influence.
Right. And it's not just random noise. There are actors behind it, industries, governments, special interest groups.
And even individuals now, right? Influencers, elites on social media.
For sure. And the scary part, the tools are getting so much more sophisticated. AI, machine learning, they can churn out and spread this stuff incredibly fast and make it look really convincing.
Yeah, it's striking how easily and, frankly, cheaply false information can spread now. It uses both old and new tech in ways we just haven't seen before.
Like that deep fake call.
Exactly like that AI-generated deepfake phone call just 2 days before the New Hampshire primary back in 2024. Remember that?
Vaguely, yeah. Remind me.
Thousands of voters got a call. It sounded exactly like President Biden, and the voice told them not to vote in the Democratic primary.
Wow.
Yeah, it implied they might be barred from the general election if they did, which was, of course, completely false.
And who was behind it?
Turns out it was commissioned by a political consultant, paid some magician out of state just $150 to use AI to imitate Biden's voice.
$150, that's it.
That's it. It's a really stark example, isn't it? Old tech, a phone call combined with brand new AI voice cloning, creates something super deceptive, spreads like wildfire.
So this isn't exactly new misinformation itself,
Oh, definitely not. Misinformation, disinformation. They're ancient tactics. You can go back to Roman propaganda after Caesar was assassinated, find parallels there.
Right. Same game, different tools.
Exactly. But the scale and the speed today, thanks to digital platforms and AI, that's what's unprecedented. It's a massive threat to democracy, to our trust in institutions.
Because it can confuse and disorient so many people so quickly.
Globally. instantly, and with incredible efficiency. That's why this challenge feels more critical than ever before.
It's interesting, going back to my old cynical essay, it really just focused on economics and politics as the lenses to view problems.
Pretty narrow view.
Totally. And when you look at the problems we face now, like disinformation, it's so clear that's just not enough. We need a broader perspective, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's unpack that a bit. This idea that complex global problems have so many dimensions, so the solutions have to be multidimensional too.
Yeah, it points straight to needing that interdisciplinary approach, drawing from all sorts of fields. I read this great story online, maybe you've heard it, about a public health official. Let's call her Maria. She was working in this small rural town in Appalachia. They were in a really bad drought, and their well water was becoming unsafe. The state offered a solution: connect to the municipal water supply, subsidized, treated, tested.
Sounds like a no-brainer from an economic or policy standpoint.
Completely. Perfect solution, right? Makes financial sense, government helps out, but nobody was signing up. Zero interest.
Why not?
Well, Maria did the usual thing: town halls, charts, data on waterborne diseases, long-term health costs, all the logical reasons.
Presenting the facts.
Right. And the people just stared back, blank faces. They basically saw her as this government agent pushing some city solution they didn't want from an authority they fundamentally distrusted.
Deep-seated cynicism.
Absolute cynicism. They just weren't buying it, no matter the data. So Maria was super frustrated, ready to give up. She'd done everything by the book.
Hit a brick wall.
Totally. But then instead of talking more, she started listening. Spent time at the local diners, having coffee, no clipboard.
Trying to understand the people.
Yeah. And she figured out the distrust wasn't really about the water science. It was about their identity. Their wells were this symbol of self-reliance, independence. Connecting to the city felt like giving up, like admitting they couldn't manage on their own. It was psychological, sociological, not economic.
The barrier wasn't information, it was values.
Exactly. It conflicted with their core sense of who they were as a community. So she completely flipped her approach. She started working with the town's matriarch, this elderly woman everyone respected.
Smart move.
Yeah, and they reframed the whole project, not as a government handout, but as a way to protect our future generations.
Connecting it to their values.
Totally. The matriarch talked about their heritage, their responsibility to their grandkids. They organized a community potluck, celebrated the town's history of resilience.
Making it about them.
Right, and presented the water connection as the next chapter in that story. No talk of parts per million, just talk about grandkids. Different language, different frame.
And did it work?
Amazingly well. Within a month, almost the whole town signed up. The solution wasn't in the spreadsheet. It was in understanding the human side of things.
That story is such a perfect illustration, isn't it? It shows exactly why we need to break out of those narrow disciplinary silos when we're tackling stuff like disinformation and cynicism.
Because the purely logical approach failed completely.
Right. Her initial failure came from seeing it only as an economic and political problem, treating people like, data points. A classic system-focused solution crashing against human reality.
And the success came
from basically acting like a sociologist and a psychologist. She dove into the community, listened, understood their collective psyche, their social structures, their values. Then she could frame the solution in a way that resonated with their humanity, not just their wallets.
Makes so much sense.
And this lines up perfectly with what the academic world is increasingly calling for. You see it in journals like Behavioral Science and Policy. They had a special issue on countering disinformation and propaganda.
Yeah. What did they emphasize?
They explicitly said they want to enhance both scholarly understanding and policy measures. And they stress needing input from a whole range of behavioral sciences, economics, political science, sure, but also sociology, psychology, communication, even computational science.
Just bringing everyone to the table.
Exactly. And crucially, they're not just looking for theory. They prioritize papers with concrete practical implications for mitigating their effects.
Like Maria finding a practical solution.
Precisely. It echoes her success. To fight cynicism and fake news, you can't just throw facts or money at people. You have to connect with their motivations, their identities, their beliefs, the psychological and sociological stuff, understanding the human story behind the data.
That wider lens really does show how interconnected everything is. But okay, let's bring it down to the individual level again. How do we, just regular people, navigate this fire hose of information every day?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
It leads to this really interesting and, yeah, tricky territory about personal information navigation. How do you strike that balance between healthy skepticism and, knowing when to actually trust something or someone?
It's not about being naive, but also not about rejecting everything out of hand.
Right. It's about developing, I like the term, discerning trust.
Mm-hmm.
Think about someone like, let's call him Frank, maybe late 60s, retired electrician, always trusted his own hands, his own judgment.
Knows how things work.
Exactly. And he's intensely skeptical of big institutions, big government, big pharma, big media, you name it.
Yeah.
Which, in some ways is a healthy instinct, right? Not wanting to be fooled.
A desire for verification.
Yeah. But the internet has kind of weaponized that instinct for him. Frank spends his evenings watching these videos from so-called independent investigators.
Oh.
Yeah. They claim the new wind turbines going up nearby are causing mystery illnesses. The videos are slick, emotional, lots of jargon. Frank's totally convinced.
Buys into it completely.
He joins online groups, protests the project, sees it as another corrupt corporation poisoning people for profit, feels validated by the online echo chamber, people also trusting their own eyes.
Right.
Now, his daughter, she's a physicist. She's horrified. She knows the science is sound.
But she knows arguing won't work.
Exactly. She knows throwing expert reports at him will just make him dig his heels in deeper. Confirms his bias that they, the experts, are trying to trick him.
So what does she do?
She tries a totally different angle. She says something like, Dad, you were an electrician, right? You know how to read a schematic, how to find the fault in a circuit. Let's do that with this information.
Appealing to his own expertise. Brilliant.
Isn't it? Using his lifelong skill, his diagnostic logic. So together, they don't just look at news headlines. They track down the original scientific papers on infrasound. They find the public planning documents for the turbines.
They go to the source.
And they investigate the credentials of the experts in those videos Frank was watching. And Frank, using his electrician brain, starts seeing the faults in the information circuit. He sees how data gets twisted, how credentials might be fake or puffed up, how they make these huge leaps without any real evidence.
He's diagnosing the misinformation.
Exactly. He doesn't suddenly become trusting of all authority, but he learns how to tell the difference between credible expertise and manipulative garbage. His skepticism transforms. It's not a blind wall anymore. It's a sharp tool, a filter.
That's a great story because it nails that balance. You don't want people to ditch skepticism entirely.
No, it's vital.
It's a defense mechanism.
Yeah.
But the goal is to refine it, right?
Yeah.
Like this daughter did. She didn't just give him the answer. She gave him the tools to find it himself in this ocean of info, empowering people to grant discerning trust to reliable knowledge. That's crucial for tackling any big problem, which definitely brings up that critical question. How do we cultivate this discerning trust when we're just swimming in information and there's so much motivated skepticism out there, where even a healthy skepticism gets twisted?
Yeah, how to manage that?
Well, the historian of science, Naomi Oreskes, has a really compelling argument about why we should generally trust scientific consensus. It's very relevant here.
Okay, what's her core idea?
Her main point is that scientific claims don't just pop up and get accepted easily. They only reach consensus after surviving what she calls an intense process of scrutiny.
Scrutiny. Makes sense. What does that involve?
She highlights 3 key characteristics of proper scientific scrutiny. First, she says it's tough. Scientists are naturally scrupulous. I mean, they're trained to find flaws, errors, alternative explanations in each other's work.
Like professional critics?
Kind of. Both before publication, through rigorous peer review, and constantly afterwards response papers, counter-evidence, objections. It's not a gentle pat on the back. It's a real interrogation.
Okay, tough. What else?
Second, it's public. The work is put out there, exposed to a large, diverse group of other scientists. This means claims get looked at from all sorts of angles, by people with different expertise. It's not decided behind closed doors.
Open to critique. Got it.
And third, and this is maybe the most important, scrutiny is ongoing. Scientific claims are never truly settled like a court verdict. They always remain vulnerable to being rejected if new, solid evidence comes along.
No statute of limitations.
Exactly. Oreskes uses the analogy, no double jeopardy in science. A claim accepted today could be overturned tomorrow if the evidence demands it. She actually borrows this term, transformative interrogation, to describe how this whole process, tough, public, ongoing, improves our understanding.
Transformative interrogation. I like that.
Yeah. The idea is this rigorous questioning weeds out the false claims over time, allowing the true ones to build on each other. Now, she admits real-world science isn't perfect, it has flaws.
Sure.
But she argues that a claim that has actually survived that level of sustained scrutiny is extraordinarily unlikely to be false.
So her bottom line is,
When the overwhelming majority of scientists in a field are saying the same thing, whether it's climate change, vaccines, whatever, we, the public, should probably listen. Because that consensus wasn't easily won.
that framework sounds really solid. But I mean, surely there are times when science has gotten things wrong, even when there was a consensus. What about those historical examples people always bring up?
Absolutely, that's a fair question, and crucial for discerning trust. There are two main objections raised against Oreska's argument that are worth digging into. The first is exactly what you mentioned, the historical objection, sometimes called pessimistic meta-induction.
Fancy term.
Yeah. Basically, critics point to past scientific consensuses that turn out to be completely wrong. Things like phlogiston, the stuff they thought caused fire.
Right. Or the ether for light waves.
Exactly, the luminiferous ether. Or even spontaneous generation, the idea that life could just appear from nowhere. These were widely accepted ideas in their time.
So the argument is, if they were wrong then, why trust consensus now?
Precisely. If Oreska's logic applied back then when the consensus was flawed, why is today any different? It's a challenging point, but there are pretty strong counter-arguments. For many of those historical examples, the consensus didn't actually undergo the kind of intense empirical scrutiny Oreska describes for modern science.
So it wasn't the same kind of consensus.
Often not. Or the theories themselves were just way less successful at actually explaining observations compared to our current ones. And some examples, like the supposed 1970s global cooling consensus, are largely myths. The dominant view even then was warming. So these historical cases don't always map neatly onto what we mean by robust, modern scientific consensus. Okay, the second objection is maybe covered. It's the systemic objection. This one focuses on flaws in current scientific practice that could lead to false consensus today.
Like what kind of flaws?
One big one is the problem of false positives. That's when a study finds an effect that isn't actually real, just due to chance or statistical quirks.
It happens sometimes.
It does. And it gets worse when there's pressure to publish novel findings, leading researchers to maybe, consciously or unconsciously, tweak their data analysis, sometimes called p-hacking. Or when studies that find no effect just never get published, the file drawer problem, which skews the overall picture.
So we only see the exciting, positive results.
Potentially, yeah. Then there's the replication crisis, which you hear a lot about, especially in fields like psychology. Big, famous findings sometimes fail to replicate when other teams try to repeat the experiment. That shakes confidence.
Definitely.
And finally, there are hidden cultural biases. These can subtly shape how research is designed or interpreted. The example from primatology is classic assumptions about female orgasms' function led researchers to ignore evidence that didn't fit, like female macaques having orgasms during same-sex encounters. These systemic issues suggest even today's consensus might have weak spots.
Wow, okay. That adds layers of complexity. So if science itself has these potential pitfalls, how on earth are lay people like us supposed to figure out what's solid and what might just be a widely held assumption that hasn't been properly kicked around yet?
That's the crux of it, isn't it? To deal with both the historical and the systemic objections, there's a proposed refinement to Oreska's idea. It introduces this really important distinction. The idea is that trust is really only warranted for active consensus.
Active consensus, what's that versus passive?
Exactly. An active consensus is about claims that are actively endorsed by the vast majority in a field, specifically because they have survived that tough, public ongoing scrutiny we talked about. Think about human-caused climate change that's built on mountains of evidence that has been debated, tested, and retested from every conceivable angle. That's active.
Okay, so what's passive?
Passive consensus is different. It describes shared assumptions that most scientists in a field might believe, but, and this is key, they've never actually been subjected to that rigorous scrutiny.
Like the historical examples, spontaneous generation.
Precisely. Widely believed, but based more on assumption than hard testing. When scrutiny was applied, they crumbled. The primatology bias example also fits here an unexamined assumption.
So focusing only on active consensus helps sidestep those historical and systemic problems.
That's the argument. Because most of the problematic examples critics raise fall into the passive category. They weren't actively forged in the fire of scrutiny. Now, The big challenge, of course, is for you, the layperson. How do you tell the difference? You can't sit in on lab meetings or read every journal.
Right. It's not obvious from the outside.
It's not. And it really points to a massive need for better science reporting and communication. But a general rule of thumb: if a scientific consensus has been reported in mainstream news, debated publicly, maybe kicked around politically for a good while, and it still holds strong, it's much more likely to be an active consensus. That public airing tends to force the necessary scrutiny. And this ties into how people actually perceive the interventions happening now on social media platforms, like those misinformation labels. There was a study looking into this called "Misinformation Interventions Are Common, Divisive, and Poorly Understood."
Okay, what did it find? Are people seeing these labels?
Yeah, lots of people are. Nearly half of Americans said they encounter platform credibility labels, sometimes daily. So exposure is high.
But do they understand them?
That's the catch. Understanding is pretty low. Over 40% think most or all online content is fact-checked by the platforms, which is not true.
Not even close.
Right. And another 17.5% are just unsure. So there's a big gap between what platforms do and what users think they do. Democrats were slightly more likely to believe more content is checked, but overall, confusion reigns.
And how do people feel about these interventions? Supportive? Opposed?
Highly polarized, as you might expect. Strong Democrats show really high support for all types: labeling, downranking, removal. Republicans generally consistently oppose all of them.
Any reasons why?
Well, Republicans are more likely to think moderation errors happen because of biased judgment rather than just mistakes. But it's not just about partisanship. The study found something interesting: trust in institutions broadly. Not one specific one, just general trust strongly predicts support for interventions across the political divide.
So if you generally trust how society runs, you're more okay with content moderation.
Seems that way. And another key thing: direct experience matters a lot. If people have a positive experience, they see a label and think, yeah, that seems right. Their support for interventions goes up, even for Republicans.
But negative experiences
Decrease support across the board. If they think a label is wrong or unfair, they lose faith in the system. So what does this mean for designing better interventions? Well, first, explainability. Platforms need to be way clear about how this stuff works. Policymakers should push for that.
Make the black box less black.
Exactly. Second, transparency and goals. Design choices should focus on actually reducing harm, not just on what looks good publicly.
Even if it's unpopular.
If it's effective, yes. Third, maybe consider external oversight. Given the distrust and potential conflicts of interest, some independent regulation might build confidence.
Checks and balances.
Right. And finally, manage trust by minimizing errors. Those false positives, incorrectly labeling something, really hurt credibility. Platforms need to be upfront about error rates and work constantly to reduce them.
Okay, so we've mapped the problem, explored the trust issue. Let's shift fully into action. That story about Mr. Evans and his digital forensics class is a great local example. But what's happening on a bigger scale, globally?
Yeah, Mr. Evans' approach is fantastic, and it connects directly to broader strategies. It's not just one teacher. Governments and major organizations worldwide are tackling this. There was a big report from the G7 Hiroshima Summit in 2023 on existing practices against disinformation EPAD. It shows a really interesting range of efforts.
Okay, so what are the big trends? What are countries actually doing?
Well, it means we need concrete ideas, right? Not just more worrying.
I heard about this high school civics teacher, let's call him Mr. Evans, in a really divided purple district somewhere. He noticed his classroom was just fractured. Kids weren't debating politics. They were living in totally separate realities, citing viral videos and crazy blogs as gospel truth.
A common problem, unfortunately.
Yeah. He realized teaching the standard stuff, like how a bill becomes law, was pointless if they couldn't even agree on basic facts. The foundation was cracked.
So what did he do?
He got permission to try something new, a digital forensics program. For a whole semester, the students just became investigators. He'd give them some a meme, an article, a video clip.
And their job was?
Not to debate if it was true or false, but to trace it back to the source. They used reverse image searches, checked website registrations, looked at photo metadata, mapped how bots were spreading it. Real detective work.
Teaching them verification skills.
Exactly. And there was this powerful moment where one kid, who'd been really passionate about some inflammatory story, personally discovered the photo used was from a totally different country 10 years earlier, deliberately repurposed.
Whoa! Bet that hit home.
You could literally see the shift in him. It wasn't about being embarrassed. It was this feeling of empowerment. Like, I have the tools now. I can see behind the curtain.
That's fantastic.
It really shows that one of the most practical, scalable solutions is basically vaccinating the next generation against misinformation.
It's foundational citizenship, not indoctrination.
Totally. It's like learning to read. We need to build this into the system, empower people from the start to be active participants in a fact-based reality. It's maybe the only way democracy survives this.
And that idea of vaccination really resonates with what we're seeing globally.
Yeah.
That G7 EPAD report you mentioned, it highlights several key trends in how different countries and groups are fighting back.
Like what? What's the common ground?
Well, first, there's a huge emphasis on proactive media literacy education, especially for young people, just like Mr. Evans was doing.
Examples.
In Canada, you've got groups like Civics running programs like CTRLF. It teaches kids lateral reading, basically. When you encounter a claim, you open new tabs and search what other reliable sources say about it, instead of just staying on the original page. Research shows it's way more effective.
Smart. Check the source's reputation elsewhere.
Exactly. And in Japan, their government produces educational materials like how to face up to the internet, pushing this idea of digital citizenship, aiming for a national roadmap on literacy. So, empowering the individual is key. Second big trend, platform accountability and transparency. This is where governments are stepping in more.
Regulation.
Yep. The European Union's Digital Services Act, DSA, is a major example. It legally requires platforms to assess the risks of misinformation spreading on their sites and take steps to mitigate it. They also have to give researchers better access to data and support fact-checkers.
Putting the onus on the platform.
Right. And France is adapting that EU law domestically, strengthening their regulators' power against foreign interference and deepfakes. It's about creating rules of the road for the tech giants. And third, there's a clear move towards international collaboration and research. Misinformation doesn't respect borders.
Obviously not.
So you have things like the G7 Rapid Response Mechanism, RRM, led by Canada. It helps the G7 countries share information quickly about threats like disinformation campaigns and coordinate responses.
Working together.
Yeah. And on the research side, Italy set up the Italian Digital Media Observatory, IDMO, which is part of a wider European network, EDM Revo, bringing together researchers from different fields to study and combat disinformation. It recognizes this is a global fight needing shared knowledge and action.
Okay, so there's clearly a lot happening globally, especially around media literacy. But you hear people say, despite these efforts, actually scaling that education up to reach everyone is still a massive challenge. What are the roadblocks?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's one thing to have great pilot programs, it's another to make it universal. Practitioners point to four main hurdles in scaling up media literacy. First, surprise, surprise, funding.
Always funding.
Always. You need dedicated, sustainable funding. Too many programs rely on temporary grants, like emergency school funds, that eventually disappear. Without consistent money, you can't develop deep curricula, train teachers properly, or ensure schools have enough librarians, who are often key to this.
Makes sense. What's next?
Legislation. While a few places, like New Jersey, mandate media literacy in schools, many don't. We need more consistent laws making it a priority. And ideally, these laws would recognize school librarians as the media literacy experts they often are, ensuring they're funded and utilized.
Get it formally into the system.
Exactly. Third hurdle, align standards. Right now, there aren't national standards for media literacy. Different library groups and education bodies need to unify their approach. But, and this is tricky, the standards also need to be flexible.
Because the landscape changes so fast.
Precisely. Tech, tactics, platforms, they evolve constantly. Rigid standards would be outdated overnight. So you need common goals, but adaptable methods.
A moving target.
Totally. And the fourth challenge is getting support from everyone involved. Educators, parents, the wider community. You need real buy-in and collaboration. Teachers know the students, librarians know literacy and information sources. It has to be a team effort integrated into the curriculum, not just an add-on.
Requires a whole community approach.
It really does.
So, considering all the big strategies, the scaling challenges, it feels really important to bring in the perspective from the absolute front lines. The people doing the day-to-day work of countering disinformation, especially those in fields like preventing violent extremism, they must have some hard-won wisdom.
They absolutely do. Their street knowledge is invaluable. There's research that distills practical do's and don'ts directly from these practitioners.
Okay, let's hear some. What are the key takeaways?
All right, so generally they stress constantly monitoring the narratives flying around. You need situational awareness. Develop action plans and protocols before a crisis hits. Always do an ethical review.
Important.
Crucial. Address the gray zones, info that's murky, not clearly true or false. Consider mental health, both for the audience and the practitioners. And the absolute baseline, do no harm. Be careful not to accidentally amplify the bad message or unnecessarily agitate people.
That's a real risk, isn't it? Especially online.
Huge risk. Algorithms can backfire. And finally, don't reinvent the wheel. Build on existing evidence from behavioral science and related fields like PCVE. Okay, thinking about the goal of an intervention, do pick your battles. Prioritize the really harmful extremist stuff, but stay aware of how seemingly innocent campaigns can fit into bigger disinformation pushes. Do investigate sources that ordinary person might be a state actor. Do understand the context, local history, politics matter hugely.
And the don'ts for the coal.
Don't use an US versus them frame. It just feeds the polarization. Don't over-securitize everything and label legitimate activists as extremists. And critically, don't engage with every single provocation. Sometimes responding just gives it oxygen. Now the audience. Do understand your audience, whether it's screenagers or adults deep in online ecosystems. Equip officials with this knowledge. Do focus on reaching the audience, not just arguing with the sender. Do be aware of those US versus them dynamics and the human need for scapegoats.
And what to avoid with the audience.
Don't take sides or demonize groups. And don't over-target. For instance, assuming all Russophones in the Baltics are susceptible to Russian propaganda can backfire if many aren't, making them feel unfairly profiled by counter-messaging. For the message itself, do reveal the source of disinformation when you can. This originated from State Media X. Do craft compelling emotional stories that can compete with the fear or anger of disinformation, maybe long-term campaigns building doubt, not just one-off fact checks. Do use language that resonates. Humor can work sometimes, but stick to facts in a crisis. Do explain your fact-checking process, maybe even offer training. Do offer alternatives and be open to debate.
What's the don't for the message?
Don't pick sides based on who said something. Focus on the importance and spread of the topic itself. Credibility of the messenger is huge. Do build trust. Use your real name. Meet people face-to-face if possible. Be transparent. Do ensure credibility by applying the same standards to all sources. Do work with trusted ambassadors or influencers within communities. Do stick to your expertise. A psychologist and a police officer have different roles. Do ensure your whole organization speaks with one voice. And do separate roles. Fact-checkers and PCVE practitioners should collaborate but maintain distinct functions to avoid securitizing the info space too much. Finally, the medium. Do recognize that a free press is a vital counterweight to state-sponsored narratives, especially where state media dominates. The main don't here is don't over-target specific media outlets if it risks making audiences feel unfairly singled out, as that can be counterproductive. These are really practical, ground-level insights.
So as we kind of wrap this up, it really brings me back to that old essay I found. The one fueled by cynicism. Those concerns he had back in 2014, misinformation, corruption, decaying trust, they weren't wrong. They were actually spot on.
Prescient, even.
Yeah, prescient. But as we spent this whole time unpacking, just identifying the problem, just being cynical about it, gets you absolutely nowhere.
It's step one, but only step one.
Exactly. Tackling these enormous, complicated challenges needs so much more than that cynical sledgehammer. It needs that wider lens we talked about, bringing in insights from sociology, psychology, public health, not just economics and politics.
Understanding the human element.
Right. And it means finding that tricky balance between healthy skepticism and discerning trust in actual expertise. Knowing when to question, but also when to rely on solid knowledge. And critically, it means investing in education media literacy as a core defense, giving everyone the tools. It's about finding concrete, scalable ways forward, moving beyond just despair and anger.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, the path forward isn't simple. There's no single magic bullet. But what we've seen today is this incredible mosaic of efforts.
From all different angles.
Exactly. Governments, civil society groups, tech platforms, researchers all over the world working in different ways, but often in concert. You look at Canada's literacy programs and coordination, the EU's regulations, Japan's fact-checking initiatives, the multi-pronged approaches in the UK and US.
It shows things are happening.
Things are happening. The challenges are huge, no doubt. But the collective intelligence, the practical innovations being rolled out globally, they offer a really powerful counter-narrative to the idea that we're just stuck in paralysis. It shows that effective action really is possible, and it's happening now when we replace that easy cynicism with thoughtful, comprehensive, collaborative strategies.